Coffee's done. Hey, I want to go over a couple motorcycle suspension terms. It's pretty basic, but it can be confusing somewhat. So, first, compression and rebound. Okay, so your bike suspension, you've got springs, you got your forks, you got your shocks. They have oil, valving, all that kind of stuff. But the basic thing that the suspension does is it compresses and it rebounds. It springs back to its original location. Now, everybody's motorcycle manual will have information about setting the sag and the preload on the shocks, the forks, of where that should be. If you cannot set the sag on your bike properly, then you might need a lighter or heavier spring on there to get started with. Totally depends on the bike. A lot of Japanese bikes come sprung for a very light size rider. European bikes can tolerate a little heavier rider. But if you're a middle-aged guy, like a lot of us, you might need some heavier springs so you can get the initial sag settings and everything okay. After you've done that, your manual should also have some starting settings for compression and rebound on your shock and forks. And those are good, overall settings that are kind of generic. The bike should not do anything crazy when set like that, but they may not be ideal. You might ride faster or slower or in different type of terrain. Like if you're in very rocky, choppy terrain, you might want your suspension settings softer versus if you ride in sand, you would probably prefer a firmer settings. But what these terms mean, okay, so like when you compress the rear suspension here on our KLR 650, okay, so the rear is traveling down. Just like on the forks, when you compress it, they are compressing down, becoming shorter. And then when it rebounds, it goes back up to that initial level where you have your rider sag set, which is the sag level on the bike with you on it in all your riding gear with your backpack and water and stuff. Okay. Now, if you have compression adjusters and rebound adjusters on your suspension elements, there'll be two settings. Basically, you can turn it in, which would be clockwise, will make it firmer. Or another way to say that is that it makes it slower. So stiffer or firmer settings make the suspension slower. If you turn the clickers so that it's softer, you're actually speeding up the way the suspension will react. So if you make the compression soft, it will compress faster. If you make your compression stiffer, the speed at which it compresses slows down. Same thing with rebound, but it's opposite directions. So if your rebound is very soft, which means fast, then it will rebound back to the ride height fast. If you make your rebound stiff, it will slow down the speed at which it rebounds back up to the ride height. And same thing on the forks if your forks are adjustable. All right, so generally speaking, if you're going to set your bike suspension, you want to ride over a consistent piece of terrain so you can feel the difference. It could also help if you can film it with your phone or have a buddy watch. The ideal would be that the bike rides on a level plane, meaning the rear and front suspension operate together so the bike is on a level terrain and the wheels maintain maximum contact over the rocks or undulations of the terrain, etc. That's the ideal. In real life, that can be hard to achieve unless you're on a road race track, because off-road it varies so much. So one way to do it is to go over the worst crap you would go over at the speed you would go over that. And it's generally better to start working on one end of the bike, the shock, first. Set your compression so that the bike almost completely bottoms, but that the tire does not rub inside the rear fender when it compresses all the way. just shy of that on your compression. And then the rebound, you want it to rebound fast enough that it returns the suspension back to the ride height or starts to come back up through the stroke without the bike kicking up or kicking side to side. Okay, so you want enough rebound so that as you go over continual rocks or things, the suspension doesn't just pack and stay down. Rebound is not happening fast enough so that it can recover itself. Okay, so if your rebound's too stiff or too slow, that could happen to you. And same kind of situation on the forks. So we're trying to get our wheels to follow the contours of the terrain or the obstacle, stay in maximum contact, track straight, not kick around or deflect and bounce you off stuff on the front. And the bike itself rides level on a level plane as much as possible. The more it can do that, the less knocks and bumps you'll feel up here as the rider, the more stable the bike will operate. It's always a game of compromises because you could set it up for heavy rocks at moderate speed, and then you get out on a 5-mile stretch of just kind of sandy dirt stuff. So when you're on the sandy dirt stuff, it's not ideal because you set it up specifically for rocks. But you're just gonna have to pick your poison and pick what works best for you with what you like to ride. But overall concepts or terms would be: compression is when it is compressing down, rebounds when it rebounds back up to the ride height, and making a suspension element stiffer means you're making it react slower, whether it's rebounding or compressing or rebounding. If you make it softer, that means the action of the suspension is sped up, because those adjusters, those clickers, are actually variable valving. And the best time to do your suspension is when it's, if it's a brand new bike, that's great. If it's not, you want your fork and shock oil changed, have your suspension serviced. If it's been 5 or 6 years since you've changed your fork oil, it's kind of similar to if you were trying to jet your carb and your air filter was totally blocked. It's not going to give you the most accurate results. And you want to write all your settings down and keep track of them for different types of terrain, what you like on that bike. And also remember, it could change. Next year, you might be faster, or you might be tackling much harder stuff because your skill level has improved. But if you have your baseline settings for right now, today, then, a year from now, if you're much faster or doing much harder stuff, you'll probably have a pretty good idea of what to adjust to go from there. All right, that's pretty much it. So have fun and be safe.